HBO has released the penultimate episode of their series Dune Prophecy, which follows Desmond as he goes on a warpath to root out some insurgents. And while that synopsis actually does sound rather intriguing, I have to admit that I think the show has officially lost me. Not because anything in this episode was inherently bad, which I've said about 1,000,000 times already, but because there's only one episode left in the season, and nothing feels as exciting as it should be. I mean, Haviko makes Desmond an elite regiment's Bashar, and that does make for an interesting development, but is an interesting development enough to make for a satisfying penultimate episode? I just don't know. Sure, I'm intrigued by the fact that Desmond was revealed to have both Atreides and Harkonnen blood, but I don't see how that revelation is going to make up for how dull the rest of the season has been. I don't care for most of the other storylines. I don't care for how Haviko's old flame pissed off his own wife, which led her to kissing Desmond like this was all some sort of romance telenovela. And I don't even care much for how Tula tried to keep her secret project from the other sisters. And that was pretty disappointing, because you would think that the literal resurrection of somebody would feel like a much bigger deal. But in Dune Prophecy, it merely feels like a side plot. I mean, this is a show that was clearly trying to emulate the spirit of Game of Thrones, right? Well, I remember every penultimate episode of Game of Thrones because each and every one of those episodes ended with a bang. And I can't exactly say that I'll remember this episode in a few years' time, because the penultimate episode of Dune Prophecy definitely does not end with a bang. Sure, certain plot points are getting rather interesting, but that wasn't enough to make this episode stand out in any meaningful way. But at least it won't be so disappointing if the finale doesn't come to a satisfying conclusion, since Dune Prophecy has officially been renewed for a second season. And while I'm glad that the showrunners will be given the chance to flesh out this world, these plot lines, and these characters even further, I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to end up watching another season of this. I mean, unless the finale turns out to be absolutely spectacular, then I don't see why I would spend more time watching this show. Because while it may not necessarily be bad, it has been disappointingly fine up until this point. So I think season 2 would definitely have to step its game up somehow in order to get me back on board with the show. But until then, I guess we'll see how the finale to season 1 of Dune Prophecy will actually turn out to be once it gets released on Sunday.